I know there's a lot of history already kind of documented on you, like, when you were born and how you came up. And I want to get to the creative process. But before we do that, I want to even take a step back and go backwards. I want to say, what are you working on now? So let's talk about that. So everybody knows up front, it's all up front. They can listen to it and go, oh, that's what Jay's doing now. You were telling us about a book you're doing. You were telling us about some of the sample libraries you're developing, your YouTube channel. I mean, you're like busy. So can we hit that first?
Yeah,
that way,
sure.
It's
we
not
can
at
go
the
backwards.
Yeah, it's
That's
not
all
at the end, and people, are going to really know what you're doing now. I want to hit that right now. So tell us about it.
The Jar album that I did with Randy Goodrum about 15 years ago was really fun because we had no rules and no record company to deal with. We wrote about things that we felt like writing about. And, once again, no rules, hip chord changes when we can get away with it, but memorable melodies. And Randy's a great lyricist and a great keyboard player. So anyway, then we did another album. But I always kept getting busy for somehow doing other projects. We've basically been working on this album for 10 years. I mean, I just stopped working on it when I had to do other gigs and other projects, but we're finally now getting ready to mix it. I'm actually in the very beginning stages, and that should be done hopefully within the next 3 months. As soon as I finish that, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and I've learned a lot of tricks over the years out of necessity, and I've just got the gift of being able to be creative with what tools are available. And in analog land, there wasn't a lot of tools, so I had to create my own tools and ways of doing things. For example, when you see my YouTube channel, when it's up in a few months, one of the things I'm going to teach right off the bat is young engineers need to know the history of analog recording. Because, for example, in Pro Tools or any of the DAWs, when they see bus, what is a bus? Well, I'll explain all that, and it came from the analog era. But one thing about analog that only the Beatles figured out, they figured it out first. I didn't know this until just recently. There's a way to get audio in the future on analog recordings. And when you see my YouTube channel, you're going to find out why. Plus, there's so many issues with phase. Phase meaning polarity of a waveform. There are so many things that need to be fixed and looked at, and I'll explain all that on the channel. Also, grounding problems. So many ways you can incur grounding problems, and there's so many ways to fix it. And then I'm just starting with the real simple stuff. Then I'm going to get into a lot more technical stuff as the people learn and get comfortable with the basics. They'll be able to grasp the complicated stuff. And I've learned over the years how to explain things redundantly so everyone understands. During this time period of the last 5 years or so, there was a Rhodes, well, let me back up. There was a Rhodes that David Foster discovered on a record date one time in the early 80s. And he played this Rhodes on the session and called me when he got home. And he said, I just played the most incredible sounding Rhodes I've ever heard. I said, well, the Giro album is coming up next week, so I'll book the Rhodes. I mean, I trust your judgment, David. Of course you'd know. And I said, how do I know what it is to book? He says, Andy Leeds rents in it. It has an E stenciled on it. And that's how he labeled his instruments, A, B, C, D, E. So it was his fifth Rhodes. So I booked the Rhodes, and when I was EQing it, and setting the levels, I hit the talkback after 20 seconds, and I said, man, you are right. This is the most incredible sounding Rhodes I've ever heard. So years went by, and I decided to find who bought the Rhodes from Leeds. And it's a fellow named George Mamalakis that lives in Santa Barbara, who's a very good keyboard player, and he's very good with mechanical stuff. So I contacted George probably around the late 90s, and I said, when memory becomes cheap, we're going to sample this thing. And when we do it, because you live an hour and a half away and because I'm nocturnal, I'm going to give you the instructions of what needs to be done. I wrote out approximately 100 pages. I've done sampling for companies like Alesis and other companies, and I was taught very well by Marcus Ryle, who designed the ADAT, his company, and he owned Line 6 with another cat named Michelle. He's brilliant. He's through the roof brilliant. And he taught me all about digital recording, everything I needed to know, because I was his consultant on the ADATs and the beta tester. And speaking of the ADATs, this is really important. And this is how my mind works. I'm not tugging my own chain here. I just can't help the way I think. He hired me for a consultant, and the first thing I told him was, since this is a digital recorder, since digital recording has to go through an analog to digital conversion, and then from digital to analog conversion, why don't we get rid of the converters when we're in input mode so there won't be any delay? Even the 2 or 3 milliseconds delay there is, when you're singing and you're monitoring the cans, you're hearing your voice in the cans, your bones are vibrating to a pitch in your head. Well, they're coming back a couple of milliseconds late. So they're trying to vibrate the bones in your head at a different frequency than you're singing. Very annoying. And it sounds like you're singing in a fishbowl. I can't stand it when I'm doing vocals, so I pull the cans almost all the way off. I don't monitor myself in the cans, and I listen acoustically. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of the point. With the ADATs, I didn't have to do that because we had a bypass switch to jump over the converters. Analog in, directly to analog out, as you would find on an analog tape recorder. This is the only company that's ever done this. And I told Avid, I told, name them, all of them. And none of them did anything about it. And it's only a 10-cent part. All you need is a relay to jump over the converters. Still, nobody's doing it. I don't understand why. It just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, that's how I think. All right, let's back up to the orange tree thing and how this all went down. So I called George 5 years ago and I said, okay, memory's cheap. Let's sample the E. Let's find out how many different sound areas there are, timbral areas. And I got to back up. Okay. So I said, George, Eric Pershing's got keyscapes, okay? When he came on to announce this, he called it the E Rhodes because there was an E inside of the Rhodes, but it's not the E Rhodes. And we called Eric and said, Eric, please retract that. Well, he did in writing, but he never retracted it in his video. But no matter, the E's the E. Now, his Rhodes is pretty good, but he said the wrong thing to anyone that knows anything about vintage gear. He said we left the instrument completely vintage. We didn't do anything. Eric, I'm sorry to say, man, that's the wrong answer. The first thing you do when you buy anything vintage, like when I buy a guitar amp that's old, the first thing I do is replace all the capacitors. They're going to be old. Capacitors have a life of maybe 15 years. I'm going to replace everything in the path that will allow me to have more punch with new components. Could even get down to the transformer, the output transformer. Could get down to the power transformer. Who knows? But in the case of the E, I said, George, now here's where we're going to do it. And this is a good lesson for all you amp techs, too, or anyone that wants to modify any circuit or replace things. I said, George, take a 5-foot piece of cardboard, square. Go online, get the schematic for the Mark I, that's the E Rhodes we're speaking of, that was built in 1973. And I said, write out the components in big letters, and as we take out each cap and replace it, take the cap that we took out, put it where it is in the circuit, and put a piece of Scotch tape on it, on this giant piece of cardboard. If the Rhodes ever sounds bad for any reason, other than trying a new capacitor in the spot we replaced, We can always go back to the old one this way because we know exactly where it was. So we didn't go back to any components. Like I say, I gave him a list 100 pages long of how to sample properly. And I'll get into all that on the YouTube channel. But we got this thing sounding so punchy and brand new. It actually sounds bigger than it did. We also bypass stuff in there not needed, like the volume control. When we're sampling, we don't need that because we're only doing it with velocities. We're not going to turn down the volume. We've bypassed anything that went to the power amp stage because routing goes to the power amp stage, comes back. We didn't need any of that. We just made the signal chain as direct as possible. And then the next thing we needed to do, and George is very good mechanically. Any times that were a little iffy or dead, he replaced all that. He got the thing sounding so brand new and so even sounding. You can tell on the Keyscapes road, you're going to hear dead notes. You're going to hear notes that plunk out. It's a good sounding roads other than that. But there's nothing like the E. Everything on the E is the same. There's no clanks. There's no dead notes. It's just gorgeous. Plus, you never have to tune it. And we actually did tune it because we wanted it great. We also denoised it because every time you do a sample layer, if you're playing a 10-note chord, that's 10 times the noise from the preamp. Now, it was still damn quiet, and all notes sustained, no notes are looped. They all last for around 20 seconds. So we still denoised anyway. The noise floor is down to 80 dB. It's dead quiet at the end of the samples when they're sustaining or you hit the sustain pedal. Also, I asked for all kinds of features. For example, the release samples on Rhodes. Harold Rhodes would have never let those happen if he could have stopped it from happening. But it's just a physical phenomenon. So I had Greg Schleffer. We ended up with Orange Tree samples. Greg Schlepper's a genius, great programmer, brilliant. Anyway, so it's on Orange Tree samples. I'm getting ahead of the story. But I had Greg add a mode where that turns off the release samples. And if you're using an acoustic piano sample along with the Rhodes, as Foster did, and I did, we had that a million times. I mean, that was the sound, Rhodes and acoustic piano. There's a decay pot when you have the release samples turned off where you can match the decay to any piano. We also added a real stereo mode. There's never been a Rhodes with a real stereo mode. Just like an acoustic piano, you can have it either way. You can start low to high or high to low, but you can play chromatically and you can have it pan across the spectrum. When you're comping, this is really cool because as you change the notes in your comping, instead of it being just one giant chorus sound, you've got this movement of the notes in the comping that's sliding around in the stereo spectrum, and you go, wow, that's cool. And it takes up less room. And we added all kinds of tricks. And I'm always thinking of something new, like the next thing we're going to do is we're going to time the tremolo to the host. Because the tremolo thing, if it's close to the tempo, the drummer will gravitate to the damn tremolo. So we're going to time that for the host if you want to turn that option on. And I'm leaving out all kinds of stuff.
So this piano is taking a step back for the people that really don't know, and you're speaking of the Keyscape one too, and we want them to send them to yours because you use this basically on every record you did from late 70s all the way through early 80s. And so can you just give us a few records that people might get that sound in their head that piano was used on? At
least starting with the Breaking Away album for Joe, I think. Probably the Pages album. If I used Rhodes on Turn Your Lover On, it would have been on that. Anybody that I produced, the Dionne Warwick album, man, I'm missing a whole bunch.
That's cool, but just to give people an idea, they can go to the site and hear it.
If you're a Morning, now listen to Foster on Morning. And also that album that's on, the Giroux album, listen to the song Save Me. And listen to the gorgeous intro Foster played. And it just shows how beautiful the E can sound. And since there's so much dynamics in this song, wait till he starts digging in. I have to tell the story of how the E was discovered.
Yes.
And also I have to give you Harold Rhodes' quote. And let's start with that. We're going to go backwards in time here. Before Harold passed away, he'd heard about the E for years. And by the way, humbly, I say I'm the guy that made this famous. Because when anything good comes along, I tell everyone. And it was on all my sessions, even when Foster wasn't playing piano. And everybody fell in love with it. To the point of I screwed myself. Because when I needed to book the E for my sessions, it would take up to 2 months. So I had to book the E before I put Jeff Porcaro, David Hungate, if I was going to use other guitar players with me, Luke, Dean, Ray Parker. I had to book this thing 2 months in advance. And it was starting to get banged around out there too, which is another reason the E sample set is so much better, because you don't have to lift the Rhodes. You're not playing that horrible action of like playing in mud when you're playing the keys on the Rhodes. The sample program's the best. Anyway, Harold Rhodes went to George's house to hear it, the owner, George Mamalakis. And after he heard George play it and he played it, he stuck his head up and said, "This is the most beautiful sounding Rhodes I've ever heard." They made 250,000 Rhodes. That's pretty big for him to say that. And he wasn't lying. I mean, he wanted to hear it. He had no reason to lie to George. So here's how the E was discovered. This is a great story. Andy Leeds, who was friends with all of us, he went to high school with the Porcaros, and then I became tight with him shortly thereafter because he was always hanging out. He started the rental company, and he used to go to different music stores to chase down instruments. And he was at Wallach's Music City, which was a famous music store in Hollywood. And there was nobody keeping track of the inventory. Since Leeds went in the big back storage room and there was stuff piled to the ceiling. And Leeds looks around for a minute and says, "What's that box on the bottom of the pile?" So Leeds and the salesman guy pulled everything off, and it just happened to be an E suitcase model. By the way, there's a difference between stage and suitcase. Stage models suck because they don't have a preamp. I owned one. I gave it to my buddy Marcus Ryle. But I have a preamp put in it. Paul Rivera did that later on, but it's still nothing like the E. Okay, so they pulled this box out. They opened it up, they set it up, and it worked. And Leeds says, "I'll buy it." So he bought it, stenciled the E on it. A day or two later is when it showed up on the Foster date. The instrument was 9 years old, brand new in the box. It had the date, 1971 or 2, whatever it was. George knows. But can you believe that story? What a freak. The whole thing's a fluke,
So Jay was just talking about the famous E electric piano, and again, you can find that at orangetreesamples.com or at Jay's website, which is jaygraydon.com, JayGraydon.com.
Correct, Dave.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
This is when Stevie changed my life. On the Music of My Mind album, the very first tune is the Superwoman Medley, right? And the melody goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'd think the next chord would be G minor, G minor 2. Da 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 da, right? That's what you think. But it's da 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 da. And then it goes to da 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 da. So it's
E flat over.
It's F7, 9, 11, and 13. So how did he come up with that? Right over the G major, and the next melody is. So why didn't he play G minor, right? Right?
The G's voice leading down to F.
Right? Okay, so da 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 brilliant. Da 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 da. Fucking brilliant. And it leads to C minor, really nice. Da 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 da. Right? He's a fucking genius. Oh, how about this one? Summer soft. Da 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 da. You know what the next chord is? Let's start it again. Da 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 da. You know what the next chord is? You're not gonna believe it.
Some kind of F. It's got an F in it.
Da 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 da. A7 flat 5. Sorry. Da 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 da. Sorry, Pt2. So again, that's da da da. Now what's happened is these three notes keep moving down a half step. Da 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 da. Right?
Just like that.
Just like that. So da 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 da. But it breaks your heart in two when you dum 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 dum.
Hey, so while you're there, so speaking of mods, like I listened to all the hits, and you have you have a lot of mods to the chorus. So After the Love Is Gone is like one example, right? You got a pivot chord in there, or not?
I mean the shotgun modulation.
Yeah.
All right, there's three versions.
I mean, do you have any pivot chord tips for these
First of
pop
all,
songwriters here?
First of all, anybody that's ever listened to After the Love Has Gone does not know the melody of the chorus. We're going to play the version from the Airplay for the Planet album, my version, and you're going to hear the proper melody.
Right.
Also, the song is impossible to sing for one guy in the Earth, Wind, and Fire version because the original version of After the Love Is Gone is an A major.
Okay.
For a while.
Yeah.
Let's see what are the chords.
I mean, I'm not.
What is it? Okay, Maurice sang the verse in F. B flat minor 7. B flat minor 6. Now he goes the B section. Okay, the original B section on the Airplay album, if it was an A, went for a while, da 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 da. Okay, but da 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 da. And then the B section went to the 4 chord. Something happened along the way. What dun 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 dun. And then it just went up a whole step. And the reason this works for the chorus as we go, the common tone's what makes it work to go up a half step, right? So we go back to Maurice's version. Why? How does he get to the end of the B section or the second half? For a while, dun 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 dun. The pain of mine. Oh shit. No.
That was a Stevie version.
Yeah. So something happened along the way and get da. Okay, now Foster needs to get to E major 7, right? So how's he's going to go to the second half of the B section in the original key, right? So how's he going to get from here to something happened, right? So what he does is use the shotgun modulation of B over C sharp. No. What is it? Something happened along the way to da 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 da. A over B.
The pivot chord is the five. It's the pivot. It's like a quasi five. That's a pivot chord.
Now, why does this pivot chord work well? It sounds weird, but now I'm going to give you the key to any chord you ever want to use. For example, in the chorus, the reason why right? Da 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 da, right? Okay. It's all about a common tone. We can go to any chord with this note in it. If this note is in the chord, like let's say we go to F7 sharp 5, okay? We can get there because that common tone is not going to make it sound weird. There's something to hold on to. And I use this all the time when I'm looking for hip changes.
So does Herbie.
So does Stevie. Okay, so back to the shotgun chord. Now it gets deeper because we were going da 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 da. Right now, okay. What's common with the A chord we just played?
E. E in the
There's
melody.
two common tones.
E and A.
Yep. So, even though it sounds like a shotgun chord out of nowhere, your ear's gotta say this is okay. It's gotta say it's okay because of these two notes. They were here already. How can you get away with going up a flat, sharp 4 or
By
flat
common
5?
tone.
That's right.
With the common
Okay,
tones.
so now let's go back to Stevie. This has been here the whole time, right? Fucking brilliant. And now he's going to do it again, going up to the B2. Right? Genius.
I think you're like the Barry Harris of
Who's that?
You can be the Barry Harris of pop.
Love it, man.
Okay, I'm going to give you the hippest ending jazz chord there is.
You gotta.
Play it. You gotta play a 10th in your left hand. I can't reach it. Right. Okay. Now there's a guy that's a friend of mine. Are you recording this? There's a guy that's a friend of mine that plays in a nightclub in Hollywood called Michelli's. He's a virtuoso piano player, and he's one of the funniest cats I've ever met. And he can divide his brain in half. He plays the bass line to Take 5 and then Mission Impossible. And then I'll tell him to play any time signature with his right hand and name another song. He never loses the 5 in the left hand, ever.
Wow.
And he's just totally independent, all right? So we call this the chord. When I taught it to him, he says, yeah, man, right? It's the chord, right? I can't reach it, but you can. Okay, so I said he's playing Happy Birthday one night in G. Somebody in the audience's birthday, right? Right? We're going to play it in G. So I want you to play Happy Birthday in G, corny style.
I know
but
what's
when you
going
get
on.
to play the right. Now resolve it to a C6. Right. How cornball, but okay, so play the whole thing now. Straight ahead and then until you get to that one chord. Play it corny as shit.
Like stride or okay.
The stride's too good. So he played the chords of the song, and I was on the ground laughing my ass off, man.
That's one of the best things ever.
Well, here's one question I have too. I see back here, I see you have all these huge cabs. Is that what you were using on those sessions in the 80s? Like the big cabs where you just mic a speaker? Or?
See those deluxes behind you?
Right.
That's what I was using.
Okay, so just that small...
I might sell one of those too, Cameron.
Were you putting EVMs in them?
No, Celestians.
What kind?
You'd have to look.
Okay.
Yeah.
Compressor. Did you run a Dynacomp in your chain back in the day?
I did. I ran the Dynacomp first, and then I ran the orange squeezer. The orange squeezer's right behind it.
Right. But did you plug the orange squeezer into the guitar?
Yes.
So this is the orange squeezer. This is made by Dan Armstrong. They're not very common, but that's what it is.
I have two of them. They still work, believe it or not. Cap should be changed.
Did you use the purple peaker and the
Nope.
and all that? Any of the other ones?
Nope.
No.
Just the ones you see. And I have on the other room. Lately, I've been using the exotic in the soft mode. There should be an exotic over there. It's next to the, see that green thing down there?
SP?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Also, you see that green thing down there?
The green?
Next to the small, something with 3 pots on it? That one.
This one?
Okay, this is the one Buzz Featon likes, and he told Dean Parks about it, and I bought 4 of them on eBay.
They're hard to get now, right?
Very, but nobody has the circuit. But guys that are smart can fix it. They all need to be fixed.
Oh. Is it broken?
Well, they don't sound right. The cap should be replaced. The resistor should be replaced. Everything should be replaced, but with the original part, but no schematic. It can't be hard.
No, it's not. It's not.
Is it something you can handle, Cameron?
Yeah, I could reverse it.
Okay, I'll give you one to take.
Okay. Did you ever use this?
Absolutely. Let me tell you about electro-harmonics. They made the greatest effects that were the noisiest effects. Absolutely incredible design and way too noisy, almost not usable.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you use this to get the little air where the matrix is locked and you just kind of run it where you don't even really hear it, but it's just adding a texture to it?
I used it where you heard it.
Yeah.
The phase shifter was the first incredible effect ever made. The Oberheim phase
See
shifter.
that rainbow guy?
I had the first pedal board in LA. And I got a 5-foot piece of plywood.
I saw like Guitar Player magazine, right?
Is it in there?
It's in Guitar Player magazine from like this, back in the day.
It was before LEDs were commercially available for lights. So I didn't have lights on it, and I had 6 switches and a master bypass for an emergency out. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where I sometimes accidentally would turn something on. So after using it for 6 months, I can't do this anymore. Then, and I had 2 phasers, 2 of the Oberheim phase shifters. I had...
that was on your board? You would have 2 of these?
Yes. It was a cool sound.
Were you going in stereo?
No, not yet. I was the first guy to go stereo with the Boss Chorus.
Right.
I brought it into a session, and Luke was on it, and I had 2 deluxes, and everybody went, wow, great. Except for the engineer.
Right.
We don't have enough tracks.
Right.
So he either combined it or... And on the Airplay album, I had to come off the tape, drop the gain down to get into that because we ran out of tracks, so I just left the roads dry and then used that when I mixed. But anyway, I had 5 things on the 6 switches on the pedal board, 6 effects. Then it just became impractical. So what I did next, what I was about to do next, but I didn't, I was going to build a serial parallel pedal board with a patch bay and a mixer.
Right.
I drew it all out. I was all ready to do it. And then I decided I wanted to be a record producer. And I didn't get around to it. But you know what my pedal board is now?
That Helix?
My console. I hardly use anything. I use the harmonizer a lot.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something.
Our Strat's overrated, Jay.
What are?
Our Strat's overrated.
Absolutely. The best Strat I have is a Valley Art Strat with EMG pickups because it doesn't hum, number 1. Number 2, it's the perfect middle and rear pickup combination I've ever heard. And I'm slapping an Evertune on that in a couple of weeks. I'm working with Evertune now, and I'm going to put one on that guitar and get rid of the trem because I just use it for rhythm. It's the greatest sound. On that Music Man in there with the Evertune on it, I can get close with the Strat sound, but not as good as the other thing. I've got a 1991 Strat that's super customized with some switches. Came that way, you know the one I'm talking about?
The Strat Ultra?
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Too bright. I bought it. I shouldn't have bought it. Anything else in the pile that we should talk about?
Well, you're not known for fuzz, and this is a crazy, wacky fuzz.
Yeah, if somebody said fuzz tone, I go, okay.
This is what you
I'm
use.
work for hire.
Right.
You don't argue with them.
Right.
I may give them advice.
This would be your go-to fuzz?
What's that?
This would be your go-to fuzz?
Yeah, I probably used it twice.
Wow.
What's that one?
What is it? I don't know. I'm going to ask you.
Yo, or
It's a
wee
yo-yo
wee.
wah, yo-yo bow wow wah.
Pretty cool.
Is that the
it's a
Doonesbury
shoulder
wah?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is it?
Your Doonesbury character. Wah,
Yeah,
wah.
yeah. That was there was a guy named Wah Wah Watson, another guitar player, and when Gary used the name, I said, "Oh shit, Gary, you should have asked me about this." There's a guy named Wah Wah. So when I bumped into Wah Wah on a date, like a week later, I said, "This is a great line." I said, "Wah Wah, it wasn't my idea," and he said, "Didn't hurt my money."
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The Apio tube, I still have about 4 of those left that I'd sell.
Which one?
The talk box.
Oh.
What else?
4 of those?
I still have about 4.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I can trade you something.
Quick lessons you learned for working for other producers that then you turned around and used. Leadership lessons, anything like that. Or any other producers you worked for that stand out that you're like, man, it was fun to work for them.
Well, if they were musicians, it was always cool.
Yeah.
The non-musicians that say, "Give me more blue" or "Give me more green,"
Right.
you learn to say, "Okay," and you just play something else.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
No, totally.
You don't. A key thing is to never waste time. Like I was on a date, an orchestra date, and Tommy Tedesco was on it. Was for Streisand. It was like an 80-piece orchestra, and on my part there was a C major seventh. It was a C dominant seventh written, and the orchestra was playing a C major 7 voicing. Of course, I heard it immediately, and then at the end of that rundown, I stuck up my hand. I said, "Mr. Orchestrator," or whoever it was. This must be a mistake on my part. I got C dominant 7th, and it's C major 7 voicing in the orchestra. He says, "Yeah, it's C major 7. So Tedesco leans over to me and says, "Don't ever do that again." I said, "Why?" He says, "You just wasted 20 seconds. That 20 seconds could put us in overtime. You don't need to ask a good attitude question. You don't need to prove your ears. Mm-hmm. Just fix the part."
Right.
If it's that obvious.
Makes sense.
And I mean, there was a bunch of times where Tommy caught me in situations like that, and he'd straighten all of us out, man. He was the godfather. And, he would tell us when we were doing stupid things, just keep your mouth shut and play.
Yeah.
Unless you're asked something or you have something to contribute that could help the arrangement.
If you could go back to young Jay, 20 years old, and give him 1 to 3 pieces of personal advice, business advice, what would you tell him?
I would have practiced more. Even coming home from sessions, even though there was hardly time to sleep, I would have practiced more to come up with different ideas. I would have looked for more things to play. But there just wasn't enough hours. But
Yeah.
I should have, on the weekend, maybe spend half the day practicing.
Love that one.
Yeah.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Not losing half of my money when getting divorced.
That's a good one.
What I consider my greatest achievement is I'm respected by my peers And that was important to me because I was a little insecure about everything I do. And I wear a lot of different hats, and I got pretty good at it. You know, when I'm doing guitar stuff, I'm thinking guitar. When I'm doing mixing, I'm thinking about mixing. When I'm doing vocals, I'm thinking about vocals. You know, I'm not like going off on tangents. I'm really concentrating on what I'm doing.
You got focus, yeah.
And, you know, man, actually the greatest thing of all was I was doing 20 record dates a week and turning down 20. So I must have been good.
Yeah.
I never considered myself as good as a lot of other guys, but I knew that I had good time, and I knew I could play in tune, and I knew I could groove.
Do you realize that, you know, you were in that magic moment of music, probably that, you know.
I do now.
Right. And looking in retrospect, yeah.
Oh, let me tell you.
Yeah.
All of us, Dean Parks, Steve Lukather, Ray Parker, Lee Rittenauer, Hungate, all the cats. When we get together, we always say the same thing. It was the greatest time of our lives. We didn't know that then. We were working so much, it almost became too much of a job, and it owned us.
Right.
But no, man, it was the best time of our lives.
Wow. What historical figure do you most identify with?
Well,
or anybody alive today that you most admire? We could either go that way. We could, like, one person that you got.
Keith Jarrett.
Okay.
Best piano player, musician, probably ever.
Wow. That's a big one.
He doesn't play licks. He's totally creative. Sadly, he had a stroke, and I don't think he can play. But, and he was a weird cat, I heard, but he played what he heard. I heard a song one day. I had prostate cancer, and I beat it via radiation. I caught it in time. Yeah. Had a great doctor, and he also has a PhD in astrophysics, this doctor, and we're pals.
Okay.
He loved Keith Jarrett. That was his favorite artist. I was leaving radiation one day, and I'm listening to the song, and I quickly got my... That should be C. Okay, and I noticed the tune was da, da, da. It was an A flat. Okay, so here's A flat. And it started off, it's not too complicated changes. It started off with this solo that the piano didn't sound normal. It sounded like he was hitting the key and pushing it. It did the sound to it. And I said, okay, this is Keith Jarrett right off the bat. Even though I don't know who it is, who else would do this?
Original, yeah.
And then there was not one lick in the song, played about 12 courses. The thing built and built and built. And it was just incredibly musical and fresh.
Wow.
Freaked me out. Next.
I was going to say 3 to 5 Desert.
Oh, Ted Green, my guitar teacher and hero.
Wow.
He changed my life. Him and Stevie Wonder changed my life. But Ted first, and really changed my life.
Okay.
He changed everything. He was the greatest human being I've ever known, had a heart of gold, and was just a ridiculously great player.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to research more on Ted. I mean, I know the education component, right? He was pretty active in that.
Right. He even thanked me in one of his books. I said, what are you thanking me for? Should be thanking you. He says, you inspired me. I go, that's because, man, you're great.
I know you're not in front of your record collection. So 3 to 5, 2 to 3, whatever, Desert Island albums. You're stuck on an island.
The Night Fly.
Did you play on that or not?
No.
Okay.
The Night Fly and the greatest and all my favorite Stevie Wonder songs.
Okay. You're working in the box now, right? You've adapted to the new world. What do you think? Like, what do you think about it? But primarily, if you had to say, hey, I'm going to use these 3 plugins, these 5 plugins. I know you use FabFilter a lot.
That's the best EQ there is for plugins.
Any other tips like
Okay,
plugins?
first of all, I'm not in the box 100%.
Okay.
I use the Neve console.
Right.
My Neve. So I get the best of both worlds. I get to add air and dimension. What's the term that happens in analog? I can't remember the name of the term, but it creates space because of the very extreme slight nanosecond offsets of audio. I forget the term. But mixing in the box and mixing without the box, who cares? You mix for yourself.
Right. Cool.
When you're mixing records, man, it's for you. And the loudness war things is the stupidest thing ever. when the first guy invented a power amplifier, he came up with a great idea. It's called a volume control.
Right.
If you want it louder, turn it up.
Right.
When you squash mixes, you're not making anything louder unless you're clipping the mix. You're just bringing up softer signal to sound louder against transients. Okay?
Yeah.
I refuse to use that. When you listen to my records, my jar record, you're going to have to turn it up 10 dB if you've been listening to squash stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to ruin the dynamics on account of some stupid game.
Right. It even goes
Level
back to the
wars.
drums you were talking about. Like, hey, I didn't compress these drums. They had transients in them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Any hobbies or interests outside of music?
It was magic starting in 1990 for 4 years, huge time.
Okay.
It used to be radio-controlled gliders.
Okay. So you did.
Not, you know, I'm a film noir fanatic. I've got a film noir collection that's ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah, I pretty much have everything. I love those movies.
This is going to be a tough one. Better musicians today, your era, or in the past?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know is there's tons of incredibly great guitarists on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Tons. But I haven't heard anybody play the groove. They can play the notes for days, but I'm not hearing any groove players on YouTube. I'm sure there are, just haven't heard them. Everybody gets...
Your one interview said 90% of playing guitar is rhythm guitar,
Absolutely.
Right?
If you can't play rhythm guitar, you're not going to work. Marty Walsh is a buddy of mine I grew up with, and I helped him get into record dates when it was his time. He ended up being a second call guy. And he now teaches at Berkeley, and he has a studio class, and it was guitar players first, and he has everybody play for him when they come into the class, the first day of class. And so this one guy immediately goes all over the place. After about 10 seconds, Marty grabs the neck on the guitar so nothing can be played. And he says, if you think that's what you're going to do, you're not going to make a living.
Right, right.
And also, you don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he came up with my line, 90% rhythm, 85% rhythm. It's a little tasty parts, man. Tasty parts, solid rhythm and different styles. Being able to adapt with a drummer. Yeah.
Can you maybe talk about the dynamics of when you would be tracking with other guitar players like Tommy or whoever else, or Ray Parker, and you guys are sitting there picking parts, what you're going to play on the chart, you're looking at the chart, and you go, I'm going to take this part, you take this part, is it more telepathic, or...
This is a good question.
Great question.
Yes. Okay. Number one, are the charts written out? That's number one. If they're written out, play the ink. Okay? Like on a Gene Page date, I would have there would be 3 guitar players typically. And David T would be one, he's on his own. Could be 4. If it's wah wah, he's on his own playing chicka chicka percussion guitar. And then if it's me and Ray that's left, Ray's going to play the rhythm part that's between the bass and treble clef stave. And Ray could read. He wasn't a real line reader per se, but he played clarinet when he was young, so he could read lines, but not at the level that myself and Rittenauer and Dean could. So play the ink. Now, or I'm playing whole notes with a flanger or phaser or a bunch of combinations of stuff, volume pedal stuff, just taste stuff, right? Okay, on a Gene Page date, he would write out the piano part. This isn't a guitar part. This is like Johnny Smith voicings. Right. If you played them literally. Right. You can't play them literally. Right. So the very first time I came up on one of these charts, I said, well, how am I going to deal with this? And, they're block chords, tight voice typically. So I look at the chord change, I look at the top note, and then I voice in the scale. Right. If I still had the guitar out, I'd show you how I would deal with that, and I got good at it. Quick. It was a survival method. So the top 3 notes, just voice them, play the rhythm that's written. It's usually a counterpart against the rhythm guitar. And it's actually more fun than playing rhythm because I'm moving like C major 7 with a D on top, playing C major 9. Now it moves to the B on top. Now it moves to an A on top. So I'm just playing the 3 notes, 5th fret. Now it's back to C major 7 on the 3rd position. with G, B, G, E, and B. So moving that stuff around was a lot of fun. Now, if there happened to be a switch in the scale within the chord, where automatically something happened, maybe there was a flat 5 or maybe it went dominant, I'd find it, circle it, put eyeglasses on it, and when I knew when it came up, I would avoid it if it was a clash. Right. And I'd play something else in the voicing, or I'd play it. And when it's not written out and we're working off a chord chart, if it's me, Ray, me, Luke, me, Dean, whoever, one guy's going to jump on a part right away. If it's me if we listen to a demo quickly, okay, I might have a part and I'll tell the cats, I got an idea. And then if it was like a 2 or 3 part voice thing, then they'd go to something else like single muted or pads or whatever. There was never a problem. We always worked it out amongst us. If I worked for a leader where I'm the guy that plays the fills all the time, then nobody would step on me playing first guitar. It was always worked out. There was one guitar player that had a tendency to play everything and get in people's way. I'm not going to say who it is. And when that happened, I just keep my mouth shut and just figure out a way to work out my part as simple as possible, not to step on all the stuff he's doing. Turning on and off effects, doing this and that. It's all about the job, man. You're there to do a job.
Or did he kind of get phased out? Did that guy get phased out?
Actually not. Actually not. He learned better. I probably had a talk with him one day. Let me tell you something. The feeling that like Ray Parker and I are like one brain and 4 hands. I've said this a million times. On a date with nothing written out, one of us immediately goes for something, and 2 bars later, the other guy's onto it. And by the end of the first pass, we have our parts. We're ready to cut on the second pass. Just the perfect groove sense of each other. But the same goes for Luke, same goes for Dean, but Ray and I seem to work more as a team than anybody. They'd call us Ray was like an egomaniac back then, but he's finally cooled out. Yeah.
Yeah, Robbie.
I had one question. You talked about David Foster and Tom Canning. Any thoughts on George Duke and Larry Williams?
So let's take George Duke. I was in the Don Ellis band at age 18, and I'd only been playing guitar 5 years, and I love the fact that everything was in odd times. It was a very good learning experience. Everything's divided in 2s and 3s. It's not hard when you understand that. The hard part is to make it groove. And I finally figured out how to do that in a fairly short amount of time. And the drummer grooved to that stuff, Ralph Humphrey, so it made it easy. But I knew where the pocket's supposed to be. I knew when to swing it, when to play it not swung. It was a great experience. George was on the band for a while. He's on the Ed Sullivan Show we did in 1978 or 9. No, wait a minute. 1971. I just turned 20. 1969. And we were in New York doing the Ed Sullivan Show, and George was on the band, and he had a band. And he wanted me to be in his band because he liked the string bending thing. So I played with him for about 6 months on a bunch of miscellaneous gigs while I was touring with Gary Puckett in the Union Gap on another gig. But playing with George was outstanding. He's an excellent, sadly he's passed away, excellent piano player. Most jazzers can't play funk, and most funk guys can't play jazz. He's an exception. I'm an exception, but I'm not a great jazzer. If you start with funk and you play, I've been the only white guy in black bands when I was a teenager hundreds of times. That's where I learned to play. No school. Forget school. You can't learn how to groove unless you play in those conditions. Maybe not hundreds of times, maybe 100 times. Never any problems. The second the people hear me play, he's okay. He's a white kid, but he can play funk. So I'm cool. So George was outstanding on every level. Not every level. There's nothing he couldn't do. Just brilliant. Larry Williams. He's one of those guys that pisses me off because he plays 2 instruments like his main instrument. Okay? Excellent sax player. Excellent keyboard player. On the Al Jarreau record this time, Keith Jarrett and Stanley Clarke, I hired them, right? Now, I hadn't made a name for myself as a producer yet. They were a drag to me. First thing I come in, Chick's got his piano set up, and he plays one note, and it goes bump, 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 bump. Hit a delay with an oscillator on it, right? And I said, first of all, man, we got to lose all this stuff. I just want to take you direct. That's all. Just chorus. I got a chorus for you. I know what I'm looking for Spain, right? So immediate attitude, because now I don't dig his setup. But I was polite. Then halfway through the session, Stanley was out of tune, halfway through the second, third take. I said, Stanley, please tune up. He says, I just did. I turned over to Al and Tom Canning, and I said, I'm axing these guys. First of all, Chick wasn't playing like he should be. They were fucking with me.
Yeah.
And I'd hired Gad, and I said, I'm axing these guys. I'm just going to listen to Gad. I'm going to get the best drum take. We'll cut it 5 times, and I'll pick out Steve's best drum take. And I told Gad that's what I'm doing. I said, so don't let them push your time. You lock it in. Don't go with them on anything. You just play it like you want to play it. We came home. I called Jerry Hay, and I said, who's the best piano player for Spain in town? He says, you're not going to believe it, but it's Larry Williams. So I called Larry. We punched a lot, but listen to it.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing.
Then I called Abe the next day, and I said, get over here.
That seems so.
Huh?
That seems so.
He's ridiculous. Plus, he's a really good friend of mine, and we looked almost like twin brothers when we were that age.
Yeah.
At his wedding, his mother called me Larry. She thought I was him.
Wow.
And I knew this was going to happen at some point, but not his mom, right?
I had the honor of working with Al Jarreau for a little bit, and it was through Larry who asked me when he wasn't available.
Nice.
That was a total dream come true.
Nice.
Jay, thank you so much for allowing us in your home studio, your professional studio here. We really enjoyed it, and we hope to come back again. This was amazing information, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Dave. And I'll tell you what, man, come by as much as you want.
Yeah.
It's hard to shut me up. And you take me back to an era of my life that I realize was the best era of my life. And it brings up so many fond memories. I think of all my friends that I work with, all of us. We worked hard. There was some little hitches here and there where people get pissed off at each other a little bit, but everybody would always make up and everything would turn out to be fine. And it was just such a creative era. It was the last golden era of music.
I agree with you.
I don't know what happened, man, but I woke up one day and music was free and everything sounded like something I didn't want to listen to.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it like that. There is music on the radio. There is pop music on the radio. Guitar's coming back a little bit. The guitar player in Maroon 5. It's Valentine, what's his first name? James, great cat. I gave him a guitar lesson once, and I said, "Hey, man, you don't need lessons. You're fine. Just keep that practicing is fun sign up in your room." So there's guys out there
Some
that
young blood that carrying on the tradition, but
right. No, he has a sign on his pad that says practicing is fun, and make him practice. Anyway, the bottom line with this is that there are some guys making musical records. The guitar is coming back slowly. They're not all stock chord changes. There are a few people out there that are doing it.
Good.
It's made a turnaround. It's getting better than it was. Now all we have to figure out is how does everybody get paid?
Exactly.
Because it's impossible for these young guys to make a living playing music.
Well, all of that, I want to remind you, is going to be discussed in more detail on Jay's YouTube channel. And we'll look for that soon on YouTube. So search out Jay. And once again, it's JayGraydon.com as well as your website, correct?
That's my website, right. And we'll be advertising the YouTube channel as soon as it's up. I just got to get this Jar album mixed, and then I'm ready to go because I've got the list. I have so much to share with everyone. It's time to teach.
Yeah.
I've spent 72 years on this planet, and I've learned a lot. I've come up with a lot, and if I don't share it, it's going to be a waste. So let's hope I stay on the planet long enough to do that.
Amen. All right, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.